Yeah. All right.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I welcome, and Marissa will be monitoring the chat. So we'll give kind of a slow intro in case people are still joining us and waiting a few minutes. But welcome to the second installment of You Remind Me of a Romance, a screwball romance book club. It was born of my longtime lifelong love of screwball comedies, of especially of the 30s and 40s. And they're just so funny. And then the more I started to realize when I started writing romance, that like, oh, a lot of the tropes are shared between the screwballs and the romances. And so the idea to bring some guests on and chat romance books and great screwballs was born. My name is Breen Gillen, for those of you who, in case you don't know me. I am a historical romance author. I've got a couple books. Mine are 20th century historical romances set in 1940s Hollywood. So I have Difficult and Single Indemnity are the first two in my series. And then I also released a classic movie monster homage just this past fall. It's a novella called Sea Creatures Prefer Redheads. And I am thrilled to be back with Love, Sweet Arrow. Huge thanks to Marissa and Roseanne and everybody there for hosting us yet again. And so this time we are talking It Happened One Night, starring Clark Gable and Claudette Colbert. It's a great road trip romance. We've got lots of fun books to parallel with it. We'd love to hear from you all. Marissa is monitoring our chat on the YouTube page. So if you have comments, if you have favorites that you want to share that we have not mentioned, please feel free to chime in. And I'm going to now turn it over and introduce my wonderful guests who have been so great to join me tonight. I have Ava Lee and Maureen Lee Lenker. So I will let you two do your own little intros, whoever wants to go first.
Maureen?
Okay, sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Maureen Lee Lenker. I am a senior writer at Entertainment Weekly, where since 2017, I have also been the romance reporter. I write a quarterly romance review column, Hot Stuff, as well as any other coverage related to romance properties, including Bridgerton. And I am also a writer of fiction, and my debut novel, It Happened One Fight, is coming out in July 11th. So yeah, that's me.
And I'm Ava Lee. I'm a historical romance author. My most recent book is How the Wallflower Was Won, which is book 2 in the Last Chance Scoundrels series. And I'm also in the Villain I'd Like to F anthology, which is our latest entry in our I'd Like to F series, which people seem to enjoy every holiday season to provide a little relief from the holidays. If you're looking for bananas hot historical romances, that's definitely where you want to be. And yeah, that's been here we are.
Yes, here we are. Well, welcome.
Also, Ava, I don't think you know this, but one of your books was like my first mass market romance.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Hey.
Which one was that?
Oh my gosh, why am I blanking on the title? It's from this series with the theater and the newspaper owner, but I actually read the last one about the vicar and the romance.
Temptations of a Wallflower.
That's it.
Yes.
I have to admit, that was also the first one of yours that I read. And
oh wow.
And then I was all in down the rabbit hole too.
My Tom Hiddleston is a vicar fan fiction.
I didn't even know that before I read it. And then when I found that out later, I was like, no wonder I like this so much.
Yeah, exactly. All right, sweet. Well, that's awesome.
Now. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you.
Well, then once again, welcome. So I will kick us off by, I'll do a little brief summary of our film. In case you haven't seen it, or if you, there will be spoilers, just a heads up. So if you haven't seen it and want to like come back and watch the replay, that's great. Otherwise, just be warned, we're going to talk about it. This is a Frank Capra classic. He directed it in, it was 1934. And like I said, it stars Claudette Colbert, Clark Gable. And basically it is one of the quintessential best road trip romances. Some screwball comedies didn't focus as much on the romance. Romance was sometimes the subplot or, an additional thing. But this one, the romance is front and center, which is super great. So it basically, here goes my very short few-minute summary. We start out with Claudette Colbert's character, Ellie, who is pretty much an heiress. It starts out on her father's yacht, where she has eloped with a guy that he does not approve of. And I think he's some like hotshot aviator. His name is King. It's just, it's bonkers. But the father doesn't approve. So he's basically, locked her on the yacht. It's a difficult life. And they have a, huge fight. He's trying to tell her he's going to have the marriage annulled. And she, as one does, jumps overboard, swims away, and then proceeds to find her way to a bus station where she escapes to try to get to her new husband, King. And then, of course, we also have Clark Gable, who's a reporter, whose name is Peter Warren, I think. And he is having a big drunken fight over payphone with his boss. He's a reporter. The boss is furious with him, and all the guys in the station are egging him on. And so he and this runaway heiress, who is also avoiding newspapers because the father has put out a reward for her. She's tabloid fodder. He's a reporter. I wonder what will happen. And then, and so then they end up on the same bus, kind of circling around each other. She's in the seat he wants. They, of course, end up, smushed into a seat and falling asleep on each other. And then it isn't long before the shenanigans begin to ensue, because she thinks she can go down the street to get breakfast and the bus will wait for her. It does not. And in the meantime, he has figured out who she is. And then he basically tells her, I know who you are. I'm going to write a story about you. And she's like, okay, but I forget the exact terms of their deal, but he basically says, you give me the exclusive and I'll help you get to your husband. And then of course, the bus ends up stopping a couple of times. There's the persistent guy who won't take no for an answer with her on the bus. And so Clark Gable steps in and is like, I'd like to sit next to my wife. And then they pretend to be married. There's the bus is stranded overnight. They're pretending to be married in only one room. Sadly, it does have two beds. There isn't only one, but they erect the wall of Jericho, which is a bed sheet, between the beds, but there's still plenty of sexual tension. Clark Gable tanked undershirt sales for men in America because he starts undressing in front of her and, of course, has no undershirt on. And then they get to pretend to be having a big fight to avoid detection because people are looking for her. There's all kinds of acting and shenanigans. They end up getting off the bus on their own, wandering through a hayfield. There's the famous hitchhiking scene where he very, very much in know-it-all fashion tells her he knows everything there is to know about hitchhiking, and then spectacularly fails at it, only to have her lift up her skirt and get them a ride like that. And the way after a lot of the shenanigans, they end up in one hotel, and she pretty much decides to tell him that she's fallen for him and is going to leave the aviator husband. And he's you think maybe he's not into it, but of course, then he leaves her not a great choice. He leaves her in the middle of the night to go drive to his editor and say, hey, I know she's not going to go get back together with her husband. I have this big exclusive story because she's going to marry me instead. Advance me the money so I can, get her out of this hotel. And of course, he's all excited and their cars pass each other because the hotel owners have kicked her out, thinking he skipped town and she called her father. So he thinks she's left to go back to her father and the husband. She thinks he left her alone because he didn't want her. There's a huge wedding at the house. She's going to marry the aviator. The father has gotten on board with it. She is in the most gorgeous 1930s wedding gown with the trail on her veil. The train on her veil is huge and just, it makes for gorgeous visuals. And she tells her father everything. And the father's kind of like, you can still get out of this marrying this. He's still not sure about the aviator. So she tells him everything. And then Peter, Clark Gable, shows up and she thinks he's there to collect the reward money. But when he gets along with the father, we discover that he doesn't want the reward. He only wants to be reimbursed for the $39 he spent on her for the road trip. And the father is kind of putting it together with like, oh, well, maybe I like this guy. And, there's the great line of, it's like, are you in love with her? He's like, yeah, but don't hold that against me. And then she, of course, the father's walking her down the aisle and whispers like, he didn't want the money. And there's a car waiting out back if you change your mind. So the dad has completely gotten on board and, revealed himself to be into her happiness. And so, of course, she does flee. The wedding veil is flying out behind her. And then we find that they have been waiting for the annulment to come through and have asked the new the hotel owners of the new one they are staying in for a toy trumpet so that they can tumble the walls of Jericho and live happily ever after. So that is the movie in a nutshell. Kind of a big nutshell, but at least not as bonkers a plot as Bringing Up Baby was last time. So, it's good. So that's the movie. And now we can have some fun talking about it. If there's anything I missed, let me know. But it is definitely your classic road trip movie. And I feel like I should
say the one thing you forgot was when they have to pretend to be married in the cabins overnight, that she also has no pajamas because she only has one pair of clothes. So that, of course, that's an interesting conundrum as well.
Of course. What will she wear? Yeah. Good call. Yes. See, there's so many great tropey things in this one. And I should mention also, just in case viewers are not familiar with it, if it comes up, there was the Hays Code was enacted in 1934. And it was basically a bunch of rules and restrictions that said you can't curse, you can't reference sex, any of that on screen. So that's why a lot of people think that, it was well, nobody ever cursed or, had sex or anything. It's like, no, they did. They just weren't allowed to show it in the movies. So if we reference that, but the pre-code movies of the 30s are fabulous. And I actually thought, when I was looking that up, this movie actually came out a few months before the code started being enforced, which is odd because you kind of get the impression that it's a little bit like it very much skirts the line of this could, they hold back a lot, even though it's not as risque as some of the other 30s movies. So I don't know if they thought that they knew this was coming, but yeah. So if we refer to the code, that's what we mean. Code era. And I think one of the things I love is just all the innuendo and back and forth and the will they or won't they have a road trip, they
have such great banter throughout.
They do.
It's really well written, and both Claudette Colbert and Clark Gable have wonderful chemistry and play off of each other very well.
Mhm.
So it's fun to watch them go toe to toe with each other, whether it's through dialogue or things like the hitchhiking scene where he's so smug about it and then she immediately fixes the problem.
Right.
And I also wanted to mention, since we're talking about the hitchhiking scene, that the way that Clark Gable eats a carrot in that scene is what inspired
Yes.
animators to how they animated Bugs Bunny eating a carrot. So love it.
Yes. I love that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the Claudette Colbert in this role is a really interesting choice because there's part of her that's really sheltered, but there's a gravitas and sort of like a no bullshit attitude that Claudette Colbert brings to that role. And I think that that's part of why it's a well-balanced pairing, because even though there's a big discrepancy between wealth and like access to like the outside world and stuff like that, and what Claudette Colbert's character knows about how the world functions, it still doesn't seem too unbalanced because there is that sort of core of steel that Claudette Colbert has that I think we might not have found in other actresses at that time.
Yeah, she has those street smarts or he has street smarts, but she learns very quickly. And like once, she realizes something is not going to work the way it has in her privileged world, she adjusts and, pivots to whatever is needed in that situation. So she is both like this spoiled rich girl, but then isn't cowed by the things that are outside of that life experience that she's had, which is fairly minimal, all things considered.
Which is how banter, I think, functions best, is when there is a balance between a power balance of some kind between the characters. Because if somebody's just like hurling insults or volleying things at somebody and they're unprotected or they can't return the volley, then it's not nearly as sexy. And it's also sort of like, it's, for me anyway, it's kind of a turnoff. I want to see that that the zingy banter, which is like the hallmark of the screwball comedy, but also like what makes a romantic comedy work, is when these two people, it's like Darcy and Lizzie. It's like, it's only Lizzie's the person who can meet Darcy blow for blow. And it's kind of like, that's how it works well with this kind of, with Gable and Colbert. Like, we can see that these two characters are right for each other, because this just like, it just goes, it's like this beautiful game of Pong. You're like, oh, yeah, okay, it's going back and forth, and it's really working.
Yeah, because he has so many moments where he could be like an alpha hole, and because he does, he's teaching her like, well, you're not dunking your donut in your coffee, right? And here's how you hitchhike. He's got all these moments where he could just be a total jerk, but she meets the challenge. She's very much, and she could be so naive and sheltered, but she's not too stupid to live, which is great. She learns, and she's got, what I like too is that she's got a touch of kindness in her too, because there's a scene where there's a boy and his mother on the bus with them, and the mother kind of faints because they used up the money for the bus tickets and she doesn't have enough to eat, and she basically just gives away all their money, Claudette Colbert, to help them. And he's like, what are you doing? You can't just throw away money like that. And she's like, but they need it more than we do. So she's not as sheltered as she could be. And she's got that interesting dynamic of, it's a nice balance of, she's smart, she's willing to learn, she's got kindness. So she's not just your average, stereotypical spoiled heiress.
Yeah, and I love her in this because I feel like Clark Gable, this is sort of, besides Rhett Butler, this is kind of the peak of what he excelled at, these sort of like hyper masculine characters who have this soft underbelly that gets exposed by the women that they love. But Claudette Colbert didn't really do a ton of comedy. She did a lot of like drama and melodrama. And there's so many great brassy dames in the screwball era, like Carol Lombard and Irene Dunne, Katharine Hepburn, and Barbara Stanwyck even. And I love that it happened one night gets to be a showcase for Claudette Colbert, because pretty much all those other women that I named did multiple screwball comedies, but this is really the only one she did, or at least the only one that has sort of entered the pantheon as a classic. So I think there's something about her chemistry with Clark Gable that made it really work.
They had so much off the charts chemistry, and you could, any scene they were in where it was just the two of them, which is most of the movie, but like all the scenes where they're stuck in the hotel rooms, or, they've got such great banter, and the way they look at each other even is, let's just, definitely.
And I would say, don't just take our word for it, because the Academy liked it too. It's one of the only romantic comedies to win Best Picture. And it's also one of the only films ever to win all 4 acting awards.
And I think Capra won for Best Director too, didn't he? I think it was one of those where it's like, I think they didn't think the movie was going to do that well, and then it just swept.
Yeah, like Clark Gable got lent out to Columbia from MGM as punishment for something to make this, and he was really mad about it. And then he won an Oscar.
I heard that it was like he'd been having an affair with Joan Crawford. I think.
Maybe, probably.
Who was the best supporting? Was the best supporting actress also for that film?
You know what? That's a good question.
I don't know. Because
maybe it's just actor, actress, director, and Best Picture, and script. Maybe it's those, and not the supporting. But it did win a lot of Oscars.
It did.
And
but you're right that there isn't really any supporting performances in that per se.
Except for the dad, but he doesn't have that big a part.
Well, Alan Hale is like hilarious, because we saw his name in the credits. I watched it with my husband Nico Rosso, and we were watching it. We're like, Alan Hale, okay, this is interesting, because he was a longtime collaborator with. He was in so many Errol Flynn pictures and stuff.
Right.
And then he picks up Ellie and Peter on the road. And it's just this like really kind of like Dadaist moment where he just won't stop singing, like making up this commentary as he's singing. We're like, what is happening? It was a really kind of a show-stopping performance, because it was just like these literally just sort of like singing this narration. It's Brechtian but hilarious at the same time. And then it turns out to be a thief, but it was just like such a great little moment in this. What's one of the things I really like about road trip romances is they can be very episodic, but each episode helps build the relationship. So the episodes start and they help develop the burgeoning relationship between the characters, so that as these more and more of these like kind of outlandish, sometimes disastrous things happen, it actually serves to cement and develop how these people feel about each other, because they have to react to the situation, they have to protect each other, they have to, all of these things, like when the detectives show up and then they pretend to fight, and it's like this is their real moment where they first actually, we can see how well they work together. So that's one of the things I really like about road romances, is that by nature, because they have this sort of actual linear trajectory across a map, in this case Miami to New York, things are going to happen along the way, and as those things happen, we see these two characters falling in love.
And that's one of my favorite things too, is that you see them, these two people who on paper shouldn't work, and we see them become a team, and people who seemingly are alone in the world find each other and like, oh, wait a minute, I don't have to do this alone. And we, like we're with them, we're kind of, a few steps ahead of them because we know the HEA is coming, but they're watching them figure out as they go, oh, we work together. Oh, this is fun. And like seeing them build off each other is so much fun to watch or read.
Yeah, absolutely. Because there's, even when they're annoyed with each other or they're one-upping each other, there's like an appreciation and a humor there that is it is underneath all of it.
Yeah,
Mhm.
for sure.
And then literally at one point, Clark Gable spanks Claudette Colbert. So it's like he's got her over his shoulder and they're crossing a river and they're debating what piggyback means. But like, and then he to teach her a lesson. And also one thing Nico pointed out to me, because we were talking about like the sort of quasi dom kind of attitude that Clark Gable's character has, is that he does keep calling her Brat. And that's and then he spanks her. So these are all sort of like so like as you were saying, it's a little spicier than I think we might expect from a film of that era.
Yeah, because I think it was like they were just able to get some of it in before they had to go to like the massive, innuendo
Right.
where like, no, we're not talking about sex. Yeah.
Right.
But this time they kind of could a little bit.
Right.
Yeah. I love it. Yeah. And that's, I mean, I think the teamwork aspect is, like I said, one of my favorite things about it, because you do get to watch them. It's sort of like they're just thrown right into the fire and you got to go and see what they're going to do and how many shenanigans can we throw at them before they realize, okay, this is, we either choose to keep doing this or we give up. But, hopefully if it's an HEA, they keep going. So.
Right. And for me, when I think a romance works best is when I understand the why of the couple or the relationship, because I'm not going to limit it strictly to people. But like,
Right.
If we're talking about a relationship forming, I like to know that it's about more than just like he's hot, she's hot, or that there's something I always ask myself when I'm writing romance is like, why these people for each other? What is it that they get from the other person or persons that they get from nobody else? And when you see people in a partnership like this, facing obstacles, overcoming things, outsmarting things, growing closer, then we can get this sense of like, okay, when this is over, I have a really good idea that they're going to be okay. And that this relationship can endure into, past the pants feeling stage, which hopefully will last forever. But also just like as they progress through life, we know that they're going to be all right for each other.
Yeah, that they're going to survive what's thrown at them. Because I think that's part of what's interesting too about the road trip stuff is that a lot of the conflict for most of them comes from the outside stuff that just keeps getting thrown at them. And then that we get to, like you said, we get to see in real time why they work and how well they face stuff together. Whereas, alone, they may not be able to make it work. And certainly, with other people besides this pairing or throupling or however many is, oh, this is why them specifically.
Yeah. And I think something the film does well, but a lot of road trip romances do well, is that there is so much external conflict as they encounter these things on their journey, but the external conflict activates their internal conflict and forces them to have to sort of deal with these things that have always been a challenge in their lives or they haven't been able to overcome. That they then can, because they have to address it in the context of whatever is happening on this road trip.
I was actually really surprised that he was so candid with her from the get-go, what his intentions were, which I was really pleased about, as opposed to withholding the information so that like she would later find out that he was a reporter and this whole thing was for a story. Like he was open with her from the onset. So that was never the obstacle to it didn't show up as this kind of late entry thing to break them apart. And I appreciated the candor between them with regards to that, and that her intention was always to get back to her aviator, who I don't know who the actor was who portrayed him, but man, he had his work cut out for him, because there's literally Clark Gable or that guy.
No contest.
No.
No.
What do you think about that? No.
I always felt bad for Bill Pullman in Sleepless in Seattle, because it was like they gave him like allergies and things like that. So it was like, well, obviously he's not the right choice for her. You know what I mean? Like when they
Right.
set the rival is so clearly not equal to the other person, then it's like, well, what's the choice doesn't become as strong. But I think even in the context of It Happened One Night, we can see it's not even a matter of her choosing King over Peter Warren. It's a matter of choosing the right person for her.
Yeah. Because I think what I like is that they make it pretty clear from the get-go that she was just trying to escape being sheltered by her family.
Right.
And King, I think King was literally like the first guy she met when
Right.
she
Yes,
met someone,
exactly.
she like snuck out of a department store or something.
Right.
And he was
right.
literally the first person she met. So she's like, okay, I'll marry you. And
Right.
you know,
A man.
yeah. And then, then it's like, then she meets Clark Gable and it's like, oh, so this is what a relationship could be.
Right.
It's not
right.
just any guy will do.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Brian, should we talk about books that
Yes,
we
I
feel
was
like-
gonna say, if you guys have some favorites you want to, I mean, there's, first of all, Ava has written a great road trip romance, Waiting for a Scot Like You. Also chock full of, it's Regency, but there's so many 80s movie references that make my heart happy.
Yes.
And that's a great one where it's the guy who's escorting the lady where she needs to be,
Right.
and they get in all kinds of situations, and it's
Yes.
working together.
And that one was sort of inspired by the road trip movie directed by Rob Reiner called The Sure Thing, which starred John Cusack and Daphne Zuniga. And there are some incidents that kind of parallel that. And also Ferris Bueller's Day Off, wherein Ferris is, in this instance, is the woman and and Cameron is the guy. But it's also just a ridiculous number of 80s references. So
I think
either you're welcome or I'm sorry.
I think when I got to the Footloose reference, I may have I really laughed right out loud. It was great.
Yeah, that was fun. So one of my favorite road romances is Julianne Long's The Perils of Pleasure, I believe it's called, which is another romance, which is I think maybe book 2 in her Pennyroyal Green series. But that the hero in that, the woman is like a fixer, which I think is, I love that. I love a competent heroine, and the hero is a scoundrel who she's rescuing from the gallows, and I love a scoundrel hero, so that was definitely one of my absolute favorites.
I think there's something about historical romances. I mean, there's some great contemporary ones too, but there's something about the historicals that lends itself really well to road trip romances, because you've got the well, oh no, they can't be alone together aspect.
Right.
And so they always have to pretend to be married, or, there's only one bed. So they have to pretend that they're, either siblings or married or something, so that they can share the room. And then of course, sexual tension ensues.
Yeah, it's a lot more justifiable for some of the obstacles they encounter on the road trip to genuinely be a problem when it's set in the past.
There's no cell phones.
One that I love that just came out this past summer was Sarah McLean's Heartbreaker, which is about a woman who belongs to a girl gang, Adelaide, who is also the best pickpocket the South Bank has ever seen. And she goes with this Duke to help rescue his younger brother from this elopement plot that is going to result in his ruin and possibly his death. And all the things we were just talking about, get stuck at these coaching inns where there's only one room with one bed. They're also being pursued by very evil, dangerous people. So, trying to stay out of people's notice or having to escape places in the middle of the night because of that. And it's just, I feel like it has a very similar vibe to It Happened One Night in terms of the heroine's certainly not as sheltered as Claudette Colbert's character, but she is not as worldly as the Duke either. And
Yeah.
so, and they're both sort of teaching each other things, like teaching each other things, but that too.
That too. Yeah.
But yeah, so there's that really like nice equal give and take between them. So I love that one.
What I like about that one too is that she somehow makes it exciting, and there's all this danger and all this external stuff that's happening, but at the same time it's also like a really quiet, introspective book. Like there's a ton of scenes where it's just the two of them in a room talking, and it's like the book is very exciting, but at the same time quiet and like really satisfying watching the two of them learn to trust each other and all of that. And that's a tough needle to thread, and that book for sure does it. Yeah.
Another historic. Oh no, go ahead, Brianne.
Well, I was just going to say, I was going to sneak in a quick one contemporary that does it great is Olivia Dade's It's All the Feels, right? Spoiler alert's the first one. All the Feels is the second one. I get the titles mixed up sometimes, but it's got a great series, which also, if you hated the final season of Game of Thrones, this will satisfy you, because it surrounds actors on a Game of Thrones type TV show who and it's just, it eviscerates the fictional showrunners. But there's one of the aspects, it's a much longer book and it's not a full road trip book, but All the Feels does have a little bit of a road trip that happens in it. And the hero is an actor who is secretly really into fan fiction. And so his reaction to when they end up, there's some traffic mess and they have to stay at a hotel where there is only one room with only one bed. And his reaction is so like, he's just thrilled and excited and like, oh my God, there's only one bed. This is awesome. And she's looking at him like, what? I don't get it. And it's chef's kiss. But that one's a fun one. That's a sort of a road trip, a mini road trip sandwiched in a bigger context, but yeah.
Another historical that I loved was Kiss Me Annabelle by Eloisa James, which is an older read from her. It was when she did her series of books that were sort of loosely inspired by Shakespeare and had a lot of ties to Shakespeare. And this is sort of like if Kiss Me Kate / The Taming of the Shrew were a road trip. And it's really charming and delightful. And again, has all of that kind of only one bed, have to stay together on the road kind of thing.
Yeah.
And really ratchets up the banter in terms of the sort of like Catherine Petruchio love-hate going on.
Yeah, road trips are always fun when it's an enemies or adversaries situation too, because it's like they don't want to work together, but they have to. And it's like, fine, I guess we're good together, which is always fun.
Yeah.
There was another historical that I just thought of too, and it then went right out of my head again. Oh, the Cat Sebastian, one of her more recent ones.
The
Perfect
Crimes of Marion Hayes.
Yes, that's a fun one too, because there's very much an opposites attract. And I think he's sort of like a Robin Hood type. Mm-hmm. And she's, her name is Marion. But she's also like.
Took me so long to figure that one out. It's embarrassing.
And then when it finally did, though, it was like, oh, yeah. Yeah. But I think she's like literally on the run for, having killed someone. And but it's somehow like really.
Her husband.
It's a comedy and it's fun. Yeah.
No big deal.
Yeah.
NBV.
Yeah. And they're both just like totally chaotic and, somehow right for each other. And, it's very much, she's grumpy, he's sunshiny and plays with animals and, but it's fun.
Yeah, she's like, all right. Oh, you wanted to look at the kittens, didn't you? And he's like, I did. So yeah, that's pretty
like,
rad.
So did you take one with you? Maybe.
He's like, yeah.
Yeah. So they've got some fun chaotic energy. Mm-hmm. And I think I'm trying to think if I guess the first one in that series wasn't so
That
much
was
a-
not, but it was Highwaymen, and
Yeah.
which made all my Adamant fantasies come true. So that was the queer
there were
principles of
roads
Kid Webb.
involved, but they weren't a
Yeah.
trip. Yeah.
Yes, yes. I think also Jeannie Lynn's Butterfly Swords has
Yeah.
a road trip, and I know there were others that we had put together. Now of course it's like, what do you think about books? And I'm like, what are books? I know no books.
I love road trip romances. I can't think of any. I don't know.
I have two other contemporaries that I love. Kwana
Yeah.
Jackson's How to Marry Keanu Reeves in
Yes.
90 Days.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which is the premise is absurd. I love it. Like, this woman's life blows up. And so she decides she's gonna try to meet Keanu Reeves and that'll fix all the problems in her life. And her best friend agrees to go on this road trip across the country as they try to put themselves in scenarios where they can meet him. So it definitely has that very episodic feel to it, because each convention or film set that they're trying to get into where she could meet him has its own sort of cast of characters and challenges that they have to face. But then, of course, she realizes that the answer to her problems isn't Keanu Reeves. It's her best friend who's on this trip with her. And then
One of the rare instances where Keanu Reeves is not the solution to a problem.
I know, right? Whatever. And then sort of that is very, very sweet, and kind of the opposite end of the spectrum is Adriana Anders' Whiteout, which is not, I guess, not a road trip in that the entire journey is taken on foot, but it's a suspense novel about a cook and a scientist in Antarctica at a base who gets attacked by these mercenaries trying to steal the research there, and they have to set out, just the two of them, across the frozen tundra of Antarctica. And that takes There's Only One Bed to a new level with,
oh my God, the bed moves across the room.
the bed, but then there's only one sleeping bag.
Right.
That's even beyond there's only one bed, and there's only one sleeping
ice
bag.
they have to keep warm. How
Yeah,
are they
I
gonna
mean,
do
body
that?
heat is essential.
Very, very precious.
So I really love that one because it's so thrilling and exciting, and a lot of these road trips have cute episodic sequences, and this is not cute. It's really dangerous, full throttle.
Hardcore.
If you love Danger Bangs, then you will love Adriana Anders'
Yes.
Whiteout.
Yeah.
Yes.
Road trip danger bang. Always good. Yeah. I thought of one too that is a contemporary. It's definitely more in the cute than danger bang situation. But I think technically one of Alyssa Cole's Reluctant Royals, I think it's Prince on Paper. Technically it's not a road trip because there's a private jet situation, but it still is a trip where they end up having to share. And that one's really fun too, because they're trying to learn each other. She's very, very has been sheltered and stuff, and he's this playboy prince.
That's the Prince Harry one, right?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
And he's this legendary playboy, known for it, but he has his teddy bear named, I think it's Baron Pamplemousse von Bearstein or something. It's the cutest thing. Any chance I can get to bring his little teddy bear up is just, but there is the road trip aspect in that, and it's definitely one of those where it's two lonely people who on paper do not work finding each other, and it's very sweet and hot. Yeah, there's definitely some good ones. But I think again the teamwork is really, I just always keep going back to that, because that's what's so, there's so many different ways you can explore two people figuring stuff out, and
Well, and it's sort of what other situation are you going to have that in, where you're two people flung out into the world
Mhm.
where you don't have anyone else to turn to. You don't have other resources. Like the two of you
Yeah.
have to figure it out together because there's not another option.
Right.
Right. Well, it sort of strips away all external things and you're kind of left with the essence of the individual, because like all the other things around you that you kind of use to shelter yourself or take refuge in or build walls around or identify with, all of that is gone. It's like there's that moment when if you ever have moved and all of your possessions are in boxes and you're just kind of sitting in this room and you're like, well, who am I now? Because I don't have my things. And it's like these people have no things. They have no comfortable spaces. They have nothing familiar around them. So it really pares away all extraneous identifications to the individual, like to who you are, which is like where they say, like, if you really want to know if you get along with somebody, you travel with them.
Yeah.
And it's like, and you can see how people interact with each other. And sometimes it works and a lot of times it really doesn't. And in this instance, we get to see in the ideal situation, not only does it work, but it engenders emotions and feelings and
Yeah.
bonds.
And it's the extreme forced proximity too, because it's
Right.
like, they've got all these moments where they're either, they're alone or, forced to be in a car or a back of a bus or hitchhiking or a carriage or whatever it is, where it's just the two of them, or they're, stuck in this hotel room overnight and, they've tried to not watch each other bathe. And then it's like, okay, what are we going to do for the rest of the evening? And, sometimes there is the, danger banging and the giving into stuff, but then, but until they get there, there's also like really a lot of forced intimacy where it's like, okay, we're bored. We have nothing else to do but talk to each other. So
They don't have pay-per-view.
Yeah, no, not at all. No TV, no cell phone, it's just, I guess we have to talk to each other. And then it's like, oh, you like that too. Oh, they're learning all these little small things about each other, or, oh, you're lonely. Oh, so nice. Wait. Yeah. I like too when it's the, like we were talking about earlier with it presents them with an alternative that maybe they haven't thought of because they're so fixed on, especially if there's another person that they have in the life they've left behind for this road trip, that they think is right for them. And it's like, no, maybe not. Oh, and it's fun watching them try to cling to that as they realize, oh no, oh, this is more right for me. Oh crap.
I think also in addition to that, only having each other to talk to, there's just a different level of intimacy in terms of getting ready for bed, sleeping, and getting up in the morning, and the idiosyncrasies or the things you do when your mask is off for the day, and this is your like private you time. That also provides like a level of intimacy that if these characters were not on a road trip together would never be exposed to. But now they kind of like, you're not gonna watch a reporter you just met sleep or vice versa. But if you're on a road trip with them, you might.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Like you see them behind like the silhouette of the curtain changing, or, you try to like not listen to the sounds. Like what I love in a lot of the ones I've read, especially the historicals, are where like, they're bathing on the other side of the screen and the hero's like, I'm not listening, but oh my God, I can hear everything. And like just the images are coming to life and they're like, no, I'm not going to fall for her. So.
It sort of presages what like a committed domestic relationship would be like. So these are the moments that you would see every day if you were with this person. You'd be with them. Well, in romance novels, the hero and the characters generally don't, especially historicals, they don't adhere to the tradition of having separate bedrooms. So we obviously in these historicals they share a bedroom, but like you would see them when you wake up, you would watch them, you would help them get dressed in the morning, you would see them right before you closed your eyes at night. And so you get this idea of like this is how wonderful it could be if I let them in. I could have this all the time.
Yeah. And you see kind of like how they sleep, are they secret cuddlers that like they don't even they don't know it, but they're like curled around you by the end? Or like, do they only sleep better when they're with you? I didn't have the nightmares tonight. What's that about? Like,
Right.
it's
Well,
always fun to watch that unfold.
Because they're two separate beds, we don't get to see them together except on the bus in
Right.
what happened one night. We get that thing that, to my knowledge, really only happens in films and romance, which is where you wake up entwined with somebody as opposed to like on the other side of the bed, like don't
Right.
touch me. But like in these kinds of instances, everyone kind of weaves together and you get to see that their bodies know what their mind and their bodies and their minds know what their head is trying to prevent them from saying, which is, I need closeness, physical closeness and emotional closeness.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's so much fun to like see all the little ways that, the filmmakers, but also the way romance writers code it in terms of, it's such a satisfying shortcut to get us from point A to point B of like, ooh, these characters don't know it yet, but we are seeing them figure this out, that like, oh, okay, they like each other. They won't admit it, but here's how they can, skirt around that.
Right. The dramatic irony of knowing that these two, everything that they do, all of the squabbling or whatever it is that happens, it all presages what we know is attraction and ultimately a strong emotional connection.
Yeah.
They don't realize that it's all foreplay, basically.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. And you always, you get the feelings of like, what is this feeling in my chest? Is my heart beating faster? Why?
Right. Right.
So, yeah. And it's always so satisfying to watch them, make that journey.
Yeah. Well, the moment of realization, like, I love that you mentioned the line, Brienne, are you in love with her? I am, but don't hold it against me. That line may or may not make an appearance in my book. But because it is that kind of like, sometimes it's such a reluctant admission of like, oh, God damn it, I am.
Right.
I think go ahead. I think the one thing that I was missing from It Happened One Night was actually seeing them unite after the realization, because we see her drive off to go to him, and then we kind of cut to a little while later when we actually don't even see them on camera, and it would have been great, because it built up so much. It would have been really great. Nico was pointing this out to me because he's also written romance. He's like, where's I want to see them rush to each other and admit, I love you, let's give this a shot, which is
now that I think about it, I don't think they even actually kiss in the movie, do they?
I don't think so.
No.
Like we don't even get the, final end of thing.
Yeah, there's no like clinch. Really.
And they don't even get to do a like, well, we have to pretend to be married, which is always a fun thing when it's a, fake relationship type deal where they, everybody's like, oh, kiss her. And they're like, I guess so. And then it's like, oops, surprise feelings.
Hey, my tongue touched his tongue. What?
Like, oh, I enjoyed that. Oops.
Yeah. Oh man.
Like the world inadvertently kiss cammed them.
Yes. Exactly.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. We didn't even get that in this. Well. Oh well.
I don't think Columbia had the budget for another scene with
probably. At that point, they'd already gone their separate ways, and they're like,
Clark went back to MGM.
Yeah, she's like, I'm done. I'm finished. I'm moving on.
I don't know. Maybe they wanted to shoot it from the wrong side of her face, because I don't know if you both know this, but Claudia Colbert had in her contract that she had a better side of her face, and she would only, if she was going to be shot in profile, she would only allow herself to be shot from the side of her face.
Now I'm going to have to rewatch a bunch of her movies and try to pay attention to like, oh, that's her side.
Imagine.
I need that writer.
Yeah, right? The power to be able to say that.
I wish I could do that in
Yes.
photographs with my sister, but she seems to be the one that has that in her contract, not me.
Fair enough. Yeah. Too funny. Ugh.
So Maureen, when is your book coming out?
Yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah, so it comes out July 11th, and I guess I didn't really explain what it was about at the top, but it is itself a screwball comedy, which it's not a road trip romance, but it does take a lot of inspiration from It Happened One Night, which you would never guess from the title.
I
And
didn't make that connection at all.
Yeah, no.
it is about a leading lady, Joan Davis, and a leading man, Dash Howard, who are the king and queen of Hollywood, basically. Dash is very much inspired by Clark Gable. And they hate each other due to a dust up with the press early in their being paired as a duo on screen. And Joan is going to marry another matinee idol, Monty Smith, and announces her engagement. And when she does, they discover that Joan and Dash were actually married for real on set by accident, by a real minister playing a minister. And so now they have to go to Reno for 6 weeks to get a divorce, which of course the studio is going to have them make a movie while they're there, because they're not going to waste 6 weeks of their contract players' time. And while they're in Reno waiting for the divorce and making this movie, they realize that maybe they don't hate each other so much after all, and maybe they misunderstood some things about each other. But yeah, there's definitely, I mean, aside from the hero being very inspired by Clark Gable, I mentioned the piece of dialogue. There is a scene that involves Dash carrying Joan across a river. There is a cabin with 2 beds that they have to share, where they string up a rope and a sheet between them. Lots of things. Oh, and Dash does not wear undershirts. Yeah, so lots of things borrowed from this movie.
Nice. Very good. Very excited. Your cover is
And
gorgeous.
Brienne, do you have a title out now?
I do. I've got well, I'm currently working on my work in progress is the 3rd book in my series, but I've got my first 2 are also classic Hollywood, and I kind of joke, mine are kind of homages to screwball comedies too, but in my first book, Difficult, Nick and Lois, who are the actors, are making a screwball comedy. They have a fake marriage situation too, but it's more like a phony publicity thing, and they're a little more it's definitely more of a friends, colleagues to lovers, rather than, they don't have much animosity. They've got their own external stuff. And then my second book, which is about the Lois's costume designer best friend Nate and screenwriter Colin, they are actually living a screwball comedy. So that's Single Indemnity. And that was one that was really fun for me to write, because it's not a road trip either, but I definitely played with the teamwork aspect, because she's got a pretty huge secret that she's keeping from everybody. And that was one of the things I played with where exactly I wanted Colin to find out about the secret, but I definitely knew that I wanted it sooner rather than later, because I wanted to play around with the teamwork aspect and okay, how many shenanigans can I throw at them to have them try to pair up to keep this secret for her? How far can I push them before they decide, well, do we want to is this too much, or can we make this work? So there's a lot of screwball antics involving an imaginary husband and all kinds of fun stuff. So those are my current releases. And then I have my Sea Creature novella is also out. So that's classic Hollywood, but very sweet. So, and Ava, you've got your next one is coming out
I have one in
early next year,
April.
right?
I have April, an
April.
April release,
Okay.
which is the 3rd book in the Last Chance Scoundrels series, which is the culmination of it's a second chance romance. It's also kind of like a forced proximity, because they're stuck at the man who jilted her they're both staying at the same house party house on a remote Scottish island, and shenanigans ensue. But my current release is How the Wallflower Was Won, which is a marriage of convenience. And then I also have a story in the Villain I'd Like to F anthology. And this one is sort of my it's two villains falling for each other. It's kind of like my homage to Dangerous Liaisons, with a little dash of the Brazilian edition of Too Hot to Handle thrown in. So you never know where your inspiration is going to come from.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
kind of
So true. I mean,
Yeah.
my book, the first idea for my book, this is the weirdest thing, but it came from my interviewing Keanu Reeves and Winona Ryder, because when I was interviewing them was when Winona was like, I think we got married for real on the set of Dracula. And Keanu was like, what? And then it became like, no, Keanu and Winona were married. And then I was like, what if?
Yeah.
So you're right, but you never know where inspiration might come.
Exactly. Yeah. And I feel like I think Marissa had pointed this out beforehand, but I also just wanted to reference, I did indeed put Santa hats on my books here.
I love it.
Nice.
And I have Clark Gable behind me. So
Yes. We've got all our
And I
inspiration.
have my cat is in his cat bed right behind me.
Yes,
here.
I saw your cat come up and I was like, oh, cute.
Yeah. Yes.
So I also, before we go, you can't really see it, but I wanted to say I did bring Cary Grant to the
you
party.
wore it. You wore.
I
I
did.
love
It's
it.
May Your Days Be Carry and Bright. This is a Kate Gabrielle has a fantastic line of classic movie, just everything, shirts, pins. Check out her stuff.
Christmas ornaments.
Yeah.
all sorts of things.
So fun. If you love classic movies, she's the go-to. But I decided I needed to bring Cary to the party this evening. So even though he's not in this movie, he's in a lot. So, well, I guess on that note, this has been such a fun discussion. I hope you all enjoyed it. I had a blast. Thank you so much, Maureen and Ava. This was great. I was so excited to talk about this movie with the two of you and about road trips, and I'm so glad we made it happen. Again, thanks to Roseanne, Marissa, everybody at Love Sweet Arrow.
Yes.
Oh, I almost forgot to shout out. They have some in time for the holidays gift box bag sets where you can get, it's romance reads and themed extras like candles and things, but they have an amnesia themed one, but they also have a road trip themed gift collection. So if you have been inspired tonight, check out their gift set for road trips. And hopefully have a very happy holidays, everyone, whether you celebrate Christmas, Hanukkah, Festivus, Happy New Year, everything. Thank you for taking a little time on a Friday night to come chat with us. And then
Thank you.
Yeah, and hopefully maybe we'll do more of these in the future. So stay tuned.
That sounds great. All
Thanks for
right.
asking us, Brianne, and thank
Yeah.
you, Love Sweet Arrow, for hosting us.
Yes. And thanks to everyone who's joined us. We look forward to seeing you on the interwebs.
Yes, sounds good. Come find us.